All right, guys, in the last one, we walked through Tamagui, their starter kit, walked through how the whole monorepo is basically put together on a high level. And then we also discussed reasons why we want to build our own one, that being we want to use Kinde Auth, we want to use Prisma, we want to use TRPC, and yeah, we want to use Tamagui as the base. So in this one, we're going to start implementing the auth and also probably TRPC. So let's jump in and get going. All right, so let me pull up my notes. There's a bit to go. Okay, so the first thing first is we want to update our Expo app. We want to bundle the bundle identifying scheme. This is so that we can jump in if we want to log in. We need to have a bundle identifier. So that lives inside of Expo app. So let's just look for this. It would help if I knew what the file was called. I believe it's here, app.json. So you can see here we got a whole bunch of stuff. It's like, what's your project name? All right, so we're just going to run through here. I'm just going to go simple. I'm just going to call it my 4x4. Okay. The one thing that I need to change here is it is info.my4x4. That's in the package. And then also here for the bundle identifier, we're going to update that. And then the project ID, we don't have one for EAS. It's like a separate build platform from Expo, which we don't have right now. So we will do that. So that's that part. Now, what we want to do here, a very useful tool when developing locally, is using .env, right? So we like those .env files. So let's add that. So we're going to go yarn add .env and .env CLI. All right, let that run. Okay, that's done. Then what we need to do here is go into Next and add that package to our package.json for Next. So what does that look like? So the first thing is we've installed this at the root repo, but we need it inside of our apps Next. And then see, Next has its own package here, right? So we want to add .env CLI to this one. And that's going to be a dependency. So let me just open up this one and check. In here we got apps Next, package, and then we have .env CLI. So let's chuck that in there. Let's just, the one thing you do need to check is just check this is the same version, 730. Awesome. Now we want to add this to our git ignore. So let's just add this down the bottom here. We don't want to track ever the env file, right? You don't want to commit sensitive variables to the internets. This causes lots of problems if you follow what's going on. Okay, so that's that one. Now we want to add some scripts. Okay, so apps Next. So we need to go into here. So we need to look for our scripts, which live inside of Next. I'm just double checking and confirming. So here, so it goes Next package. Now, see, at the moment we're just running Next dev. What we want to do is say it runs like this, right? So we want to tell it that Tamagui target is web, yarn with env Next dev, and I'm going to run it on port 3001. You can actually leave that off, so we'll just leave that off for now. I will put it on. We'll leave it on just because it'll help us with the auth later. Now for build, again, we want to use our environment variables. So we're just copy pasting this in, yarn build, cd into the apps Next. target web with env next build. All right. And then finally with env, because we've been calling that command just willy-nilly, not without it being defined, with env, whenever we call yarn within env, we're going to run this. We're going to say .env, and it's going to go back 2 steps to the env file, okay, which doesn't exist yet. All right. So firstly, let's get rid of this. We're going to delete this env file here inside of next, because we're going to move that. And here's what you can see. So these are currently defined here, Tamagui target, but we are now hard coding them there. Okay. And I don't know if we use these. I think we can move those away. So let's just delete this file. All right. Save this package. Now we're going to add those other env vars that we just deleted to next config. And we're going to just do it like this. So I'm just going to see it here. So we just do it straight after join like this. Okay, so now we've moved those env files into the next config file and we just code them there. All right. So that's that part for next. Now we'll move on to Expo. So Expo is living in here. We need to go into the Babel config. And from here, straight underneath module exports, we're going to say define env. And this is so that Babel can find this file. So we're just going back 2 steps, finding the env, and then we're requiring it and just passing it to .env. All right. So that's how we're now giving the env to both of our apps, and now we can actually play with that. We do have to define a new file here called .env, because this is where they're going to be looking. So let's just do that. Okay, next up, let's add authentication. So to do that, we are going to jump into this file here, and we're going to go to the root package.json, and we are going to I'm just going to copy this path. All right, and we are going to update this web script, this one, to this. So web, instead of yarn build, cd apps next, yarn dev. So you can see it calls yarn next. We want to call yarn dev. And what is that? Yarn dev is this, right? Because we wanted to use the env file here. So we need to make sure we call that. Now, inside of the packages, we need to add Kinde Auth. All right, so inside of that, so let's do that. So we're going to go into cd, we're going to go apps, cd, next, and then we're going to go yarn add, and we're going to grab Kinde Auth. Okay, so we drop that in, let that install. So that's going to now install it here. Okay. All right. So now let's go into the app layout. So we go inside of, all right. So from there we go into pages app. And now what we're going to do is we're going to wrap that into a Kinde provider, right? So this is going to be our auth provider. And we're going to do this around the theme provider. Okay, so we chuck that there, and that should look like that. So we have import Kinde provider from Kinde Auth, Next.js, and then we're going to wrap it there. Sweet. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set up the API. So we're used to doing this in Next.js. We're going to set up an API folder, and we're going to have auth, and then we're going to have a catch-all here for Kinde Auth.ts. And now what this does is just exports a handle auth. Okay, so we're importing handle auth from Kinde Auth Next.js. Now, if you jump into this library, it's probably deviating off the path a little bit, but you'll see what this does. It exports a few endpoints. So I just want to quickly show you this because I spent a bit of time in there. Because I've just jumped into the Kinde repo. So in Kinde Auth, you go source, handlers, page route is what we're using. And then you can see this handle auth function, which is what we're exporting, right? Now, if you have a look at what this does, sometimes it's very good to see how these things work. It has a route map here. And what it's doing is it's taking in the query, and depending on what the query endpoint is, so it could be create org, it then just maps it to the create org function, or one that you're going to use a lot is call it the login. It's going to just supply this function and it's going to start its work. Okay, so that's just what this is doing. So it looks very simple. It's like, well, it's doing nothing, but it's just creating a wrapper that exports a whole bunch of things. And depending on the path, so we could call API auth login, API auth logout, etc. And we have get token, all of these things, API auth me, etc. There's a setup one for OAuth. These things are exported from here. Okay, just wanted to cover that because I think it is important to know how it works. All right, so now what we can do is we can add login links, and that's what I was just talking about. I'll just show you what they look like because we don't need them right now. I'll grab those. So this is what it looks like: API auth login, API auth register, API auth logout. These are the ones that we're mainly concerned with in most apps. So let's add those into the index. We'll just chuck them in there because it's like cowboy, just right here. Okay, so we're gonna see these appear soon in our code there. Okay, so we've added those. They're not gonna do anything right now, I don't think. If we hit sign in, it's gonna invalid URL because we haven't set up our credentials correctly. All right. But that's cool, we will do that. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is create a util. So we're gonna set that up inside of packages, app, and a new folder, utils, and then this will be Kinde Auth.ts. And I might actually even change something here. I'm gonna call it hooks. And this will be called use Kinde Auth. All right. So we will grab that one from here. So let's just close this off. So it's inside of packages, app, hooks. We've actually renamed this one inside of our one to use session. So I might do the same here actually. I'm going to rename this to use session. This just allows us to, if we ever want to change it out, we can. Okay. So we're not using TRPC yet. So we get rid of that. It's a sneak peek. And then the Kinde client. So what we will do here as well while we're here is create a new file, util/Kinde client. And we've just pulled that one out just so that we don't get a circular callback. So this used to live inside of the use session, but we've moved it out recently into here. And you can see this one uses the React Native SDK. So this is the React Native code, okay? So we do need to add this, but we'll do that soon. So Kinde client, check is authenticated. So you can see here we have this all going on. We have two use session hooks as well. We have a web version. All right, so I'm going to paste that in here. So like I showed you in the beginning, we have a web version and a native version, and they both use different things because native uses a different store and the web uses, I believe it's cookies. So no TRPC yet. Again. All right. So let's look at what this does. So we've created a hook use session, and we've done that so that we could mimic Next.Auth, because in Next.Auth you can do use session and then you can pull up the user. And we've added a little bit to this as well. We've added, now we export a get token callback. We have is authenticated, is loading. We have a login function, a logout function, the kind user, and then our user. Okay, so this is what we're doing inside a use session. And you can just see here, so get token hits our API auth get token endpoint and fetches that and stores it for us. And then we're using the use kind auth from the kind auth thing to get the get token actual method, is authenticated, is loading, and the user, which we cast to kind user. All right, so this is the user from the kind DB. And then we just export this. So it's basically just a wrapper with one extra function, right? Because we just store this here. Okay, so that's that piece there. That's the use session. So if we continue on, what do we have? So we've done that. We've got the util, the web version. Great. Okay, so now what we're going to do, so we've done the React, the Next app. Now we're going to do the Expo app. So let's jump into Expo's repo. So it'll be one back here. Jump into Expo. Now in Expo, we need to add a few packages. So we need to change, firstly, we need to change the start to Expo start dev client. Okay, let me just confirm that one. Apps Expo package dev client. Okay. Now we need to add the following packages. So we're going to go into yarn here and we're going to go yarn add. And what you've noticed is if we're in the directory, a specific directory, and there's a package.json, yarn will add it to that package.json, not the root. There are multiple here. And depending on a monorepo, like the Expo app needs some packages different to the next. So you can actually add to each one, and you can also have shared ones down the bottom. So that's kind of cool. So we want to use Expo Secure Store. We want to use React Native in-app browser reborn. We want to use React Native keychain. I'm going to add those in. Okay. So these are just the things like the keychain. We're going to use keychain on mobile rather than cookie store because it's a different way of storing information for native clients. Okay, so you can see those things have been added in. All good. Let's continue. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to add this YStack button to our package app features home screen. We're going to chuck it here. Now we're going to grab, using our use session, up here. So now because we've created this shared hook, we can just import use session from apps hooks use session. Now, because we created a web and a native version, it will use the one depending on the platform. This include user true. We're going to add to this later once we have TRPC running, but that basically means that once we get the kind user, we're going to query our database and get the actual user. Out of this thing, we get is authenticated, login, logout, and user. Now we're using these methods down here to create the login, logout button. Now we should see that, boom. So we don't need this guy anymore. You go. Link, login, logout. Okay. So now that should work. And then here, what this guy needs to just rerun. So we will restart him. Both of these guys are probably going to have a bit of a tough time. All right, so what we can do in the meantime is we can sign up for Kind. Right, so Kind with an E.com, start for free, register an account, and then get set up. So I'm just going to continue with Google because I've already done this. And we will see. Okay. So once we're in Kind, switch environment, I'm going to switch to development. And there's a few things we want to do. So we have applications. We also have authentication in here. So the cool thing about Kind is you can do passwordless or password, and it's very easy to set up Facebook and stuff like that. So you just add a connection. So you can configure what applications use password or passwordless. And then your applications are here and you can add them. So default backend and front end. Sweet. So we've got all that. So you guys can set all these up, get all your credentials from Kind. And then once you've done that, we're going to add them into our env file. So I'll open up the template. So you can see these are the things that you need. So if we add these here, you need these things in here. So you need the Kind native post callback. You need the Kind native post logout, Kind post, issuer, site, and client ID. You're going to need all those things to get this running. So fill those in your .env file and come back. So now that you've added your environment variables, restart the server, key point, and reload the page. It'll be now on 3001 because we changed the port. Now, if we hit login, get the login screen, login, beautiful, and we're back here and should be logged in. So if we just do a quick, let's jump into the screen, and if we console log is authenticated, we can also get the Kind, I believe we can get the Kind user here. Yep. So we do this and this, save that out, and let's jump into the inspector. What do we have? Is authenticated true, and there's our Kind details. So we have logged in with Kind. It was that easy. So now we have login. All right, so we'll just double check that on React Native. Okay, so we've got a bit of a problem here. So when running React Native, there's a problem with the project. Path is not defined. Now, this is a very cryptic and not very helpful problem. There's no path inside of our screen. If we look for path, it's never called. But in here, we're using path. So if we just require path there and reboot this guy, let's give a look. Another thing that I've also done is I've CD'd into apps Expo and run yarn iOS. And what that does is going to build the Cocoa pods. It's a lot longer build step, but you do need that if you want to use some native functionality. So you might need to run that. I usually just run yarn iOS directly in the Expo directory. That's a tongue twister. Just to make sure everything works. You can see it does all the compilation. And there's the linking of pods. Without getting complicated, pods are like little packages you can use when doing native development. It's part of iOS, Cocoa pods. But Expo and all that and React Native take care of all of this for you. So we just got to run this. It will generate, compile, do all the work, and we can just sit back and wait. And now it should launch our iPhone 14 Pro, and hopefully that is the problem, because otherwise I'm stumped. Let's have a look. Looks like it's compiling this time. It does take a bit of time. I won't make you wait through this every single time. I promise. Bundling complete, perfect. So that's the problem, right? So I hadn't defined path here. So it's a super important step, which I forgot. There's no error was thrown here for some reason. It wasn't saying it wasn't there. But now it's running. All right, so just keep an eye out for that one. Okay, let's see if this works. Log in. Oh no, I don't even know my password. Boom. All right. There we go. So we logged in. True. And there's the email. All right. That's it. So we've got authentication with Kind running on React Native as well as the web with Next. All right. On the next one, we will jump into TRPC and setting that up so that we can start hitting our API. Catch you on the next one.